Okay. Okay. I want you all to understand something, right? That book, that manuscript, right? The manuscript that I just showed you, right? Did the majority of you Negroes understand that within that manuscript, right, the prophets, the apostles, you understand that they were all Negroes, right? The prophets were Negroes from every tribe. And the apostles were Negroes from every tribe. So that's pretty special. That's pretty important. That's something that I want you all to understand. Both the apostles and the prophets are Negroes from every tribe. Okay? Now, with that being said, right, I've noticed that now we have many problems as a people, right? We have, just not even to name them, we just have many problems according to the scriptures. So it doesn't pay off for me to say the problem is, or the problem is. It doesn't pay off to say that, because we have a multiplication of problems, issues, as a people, as a unit, as a whole. So, because you know how when people try to analyze, or when people try to speak or preach or whatever the case may be, one of the things that they like to do is say, well, the problem is. Well, I've learned that that's a waste of time. To say the problem is a waste of time. So what I need many of you to understand, right, is that we have a series of issues that has been around throughout the course of history of the Bible, right? Now, what one of the problems is, and I can go on and on and on with not only problems with myself, but each individual has issues and circumstances and so forth and so forth. So, however, the majority of you Negroes have never picked up this book. Now, I mean, you picked it up, but you've never studied it. Many of you don't believe it, and so forth and so forth. Now, me personally, I've picked up other religious scrolls. I've picked up the Book of Mormon. I've picked up the Quran. I've picked up Kemet, or as most people would call it, the so-called quote-unquote Egyptology. I've picked up the the Book of the Dead, which is a religious book, by the way, believe it or not. I've even looked into what's it called? Some of Buddhist manuscripts even, right? And they have different types of Bibles, the Latin Vulgate, and so forth, right? Jehovah's Witness uses a Bible. I don't know what exact Bible they use. I know they don't use the KJV. Jehovah's Witness, well, some of them do, but, the whole objective is to negate John 1:1. Or the objective of Jehovah's Witness is to diminish the Messiah. Okay? So I've picked up and I've searched other scrolls, I've searched other manuscripts, right? And I refuse to be tossed to and fro by every wind doctrine. And I refuse to be tossed to and fro by the commandments of men. Okay? So now, what we're going to do here is I'd like to ask you a question, because is it 501c3? Is it stupidity or absolute rebellion? Yahusha now holds all the offices: king, prophet, priest, and judge. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Yahusha, so that each person recompense what is due for what he or she has done in the flesh, whether good or bad. Is it the 501c3, stupidity, or absolute rebellion? Yahusha now holds all the offices: king, prophet, priest, and judge. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Yahusha, so that each person recompense what is due for what he or she has done in the flesh, whether good or bad. So now, I'm not speaking to anybody in particular. Many of you use the 501c3, and many of you use your own foolishness, and many of you are simply absolutely rebellious. So it has to be one of those three reasons that the judge is not being treated like a judge. Okay? Now, the circumcision, you all should stop judging the men of the streets and a lot of the men that were bred in the streets. Many of you should stop judging them, you of the circumcision, because there are many cases where Christ would prefer those men than many of you all. Some of you all in the circumcision are good men and women, but a lot of you are very evil. And there's a lot of evil from the brothers that were bred in the streets as well. But there are also a lot of good brothers that were bred in the streets. So many of you from the circumcision, you really don't have the right to eat from the same table as some of the men that were bred under circumstances. Okay? So now I want to give a scripture. But before I give this scripture, I want to say something. Okay? Now, certainly, many of you don't see me fit as a leader. And I'm okay with that. Okay? So, you got to understand something. What many of you need to understand is that there will be men whom are leaders, right? But people, and I'm not going to say our people only, because that would be false. Black people certainly aren't the only people that make this mistake. The Caucasian makes this mistake. The Arab makes this mistake. The Chinaman makes this mistake. The Japanese man makes this mistake. The Indian man makes this mistake. The Turkish man makes this mistake. Okay? The only people that don't make this mistake is the Esau. Why? Because, well, they actually do. They make the ultimate mistake because their leader is Satan. But at least they all negotiate one leader. Okay? Now, the other nations, they have a better negotiation on one leader than black folks. Black folks, the only time that the majority of you negotiate one leader is when it comes to politics. But when it comes to amongst ourselves, you all choose your leader based on looks and based on he or she speaking your own passions. So, one thing that, and I don't have to worry about this, and I'm very okay with that. As I've said before, I'm satisfied with my ministry. The majority of you Negroes, you take my ministry, you take these messages from my ministry, and you doodle on my messages. You squat and take a shit and a crap on my messages. And then you toss them to the moon. Then when they come back down, you burn them. That's how the majority of you all feel about my messages. You wait till they fall back down, then burn them. So therefore, I'm in a comfort zone. Now, I'm not in a comfort zone. I'm always uncomfortable. But the comfort zone that I'm in is that I don't have anything to prove. I'm a man that comes and gives the Debar of Yahushua HaMashiach, which is the word of Christ, the Debar of Yahushua HaMashiach. I leave it with you all, and then you all take it and do with it as you may. Some of you whom are wise, you take the word and you adhere to it. Now, I'm the type of man that the majority of folk don't care about. I'm of lower esteem to you all than many of the people that you portray as whether gangsters or popular, or even when it comes to those in entertainment. You all would regard me as spittle or nothing in comparison to many of these individuals. I like this position. I love this position. This position is my comfort zone. Uncomfortable is my comfort zone. The underdog is where I take most pleasure, and it's how I operate best. So, it's very important to me that I let you all understand that I am attempting not to put myself on a pedestal, but it is this that you all have a problem with, and not me. The problem is that scroll. The problem is not me, but the problem that those like me and those before me have had was that scroll. We speak the scroll, therefore, we are viewed as the mouthpiece of that scroll. Now, I want to pause for a minute because I want you to understand. I want you to understand that it is the ultimate mental illness. God damn it, I'm out of water. I just had me another milkshake. I just had another milkshake. Those milkshakes are effing good, man. I get them right there on 63rd Street, 63rd and Caribbean Brothers right there on 63rd Street, man. They make a good milkshake. This is the milkshake after remember when I told you the last one I had? This is the one right after that. So what's that? About a week or so? I don't even care. I wanted me a milkshake. I went and bought it. But I get the small. At least I get the small one. I don't get the big one because it's not good with my system. You know what I'm saying? But I went and got it, man. I wanted it. I went and got it. So what happens is I drink water, I flush it out. Later on this evening, I'll feel great, and I get my wind back up, and I'll be good to go. So now I got a lot of scripture to read, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do it. I'm going to read the scripture, and I want to try to do this in 4. I want to see if I can do this in 4. So I want to read this again. Now, I'm going to change the word stupidity to foolishness because I do know that a lot of the terms that I use can bring aggression toward me. So I'll show, but see, it's really what the Bible said. But nonetheless, you all are still going to get very angry because many of you are very sensitive. And I guess I can see that would stir up some conflict, right? So I'm going to ask the question again. Is it 501c3? Is it foolishness? Or is it absolute rebellion? Which one is it? Yahusha now holds all the offices. He's the king, the prophet, the priest, and the judge. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Yahusha, so that each person recompense what is due for what he or she has done in the flesh, whether good or evil. So, I think with a lot of people, so the question is, Yahusha is the one on the throne. He's the one that's going to judge us all at the great white throne judgment. The great white throne judgment is going to be a very scary place. It's not going to be a place of patty cake, hopscotch, double dutch. It's not going to be a place of hugs and kisses. The great white throne judgment is going to be a very horrible place. And it's going to be a very horrible time for those who skipped the first resurrection. Now, Paul is going to say, be ye followers of him, even as he is of Yahusha. Now, Paul was a greater man than me. Paul is basically saying that you should follow him, or we should follow his epistles, as long as his epistles are praising Yahushua HaMashiach. So, if somebody comes to you all and he or she says, follow me as I follow Yahushua HaMashiach, that does not mean, like, let's say if I said that, right? There's no way in hell I'm telling you Negroes to follow me. Oh, no way in hell. You know why? Because last I checked, I bleed blood and breathe air. And I will certainly fail every last one of you. It is guaranteed that if I were to sit up here and tell anyone, and I'm not talking about my sons, my wife, my family, whatever. I'm talking about a multitude of people. If I were to ask you all to follow me, then you should immediately stop listening to my messages and completely negate my messages from here on out. Why? Because if I told you all some foolishness like that, then you all should know that I would I would certainly fail you all. There's no way in hell that I can lead, or any other man, whether he be the head of any congregation, or whether he be the head of any organization, or whether he be an individual man, whether he be a man in religion, whether he be a man on social media, whether he be a man in the trenches even. There's no way in hell a man can lead this people. There's no way in hell. And for many of you who don't believe that, because many of you black folks, you simply don't believe that, you all think that a man will rise and lead this people. Now, there will be multiple men that are going to step up in factions. And this man might stand at the head of that faction, and that man might stand at the head of that faction, and so forth and so forth. But it's an impossibility. No man that is born of a woman and a man, no man that came from the sperm of another man is going to rise and lead this people to a salvation. If there's not one man that's walking today, well, I'm not going to say that, but there's a great possibility that not one man walking today is as great a man as Moses. And Moses was pulling out his hair, and Moses needed help. Moses himself, paraphrasing the scripture, I know I'm butchering it because I'm just speaking off of remembrance. But Moses had to go to Christ. He had to go to Yahuwah and say, what did I ever do to deserve the agony and the distress of this people, to lead this people? Because black folks was causing Moses a whole heap of grief beyond grief. And Yah had to appoint 70 elders. For those of you who are skilled in the Tanakh, feel free to correct me somewhere if I'm off. It might have been, I forgot exactly the number, but I believe it was 70 elders. These 70 elders were assigned to Moses to give him help, because Moses was about to commit suicide, quote unquote, because Yah gave him that. Moses and the children of Israel are an example, because Christ knew that this people love to put individuals, whether their own men or even men in political circumstances. This people like to look up to men that they can see with their own two eyes. Now, when Paul says, be followers of him as he is of Christ, he's only telling them niggas to just pay attention as he teaches, because Paul was a master at the law, statutes, and commandments. Paul was a Torah genius. And Paul was endowed with the Spirit. He was endowed with the Ruach of Elohim. So you got to understand that Paul understood spiritual things. Now, I'm going to start this lesson, and I want you all to pay very careful attention to what I'm about to explain to you all, because many of you are in great danger. Spiritual things must be spiritually discerned. Now, I'm aware that my messages are not always messages that you all want to hear. You all would like me to speak about gangster stuff. You want me to talk about street stuff. But what you all don't understand is that is reverse psychology. Many of the men who and all due respect to the men that do this, there are many men that does this. Now, I'm not, some of you, okay, are selfish and you don't really care. But some of you do this for a good cause. Some of you don't. Some of you only care about yourselves and recognition and popularity and money and filthy lucre. And then some of you, you do it for a righteous cause or whatever or whatnot. But in any event, it's reverse psychology because the youth, the children, are still intrigued by the street life at the end of the day. But let me start this message for the sake of time, shall we?